Florence, 1433. A man sits in a rotting cell, waiting for his final sentence. His crime? He's too rich, too powerful, and far too dangerous for the men in charge. His name is Cosimo de Medici, but those who locked him up made a fatal mistake. They let him live. Just 1 year later, those same judges are fleeing Florence, empty-handed, terrified. And Cosimo? He returns as a king without a crown, the most powerful man in Europe. His secret's simple: don't use force when money works better. Don't command people. Make them want to serve you. This isn't a gangster's tactic. It's the strategy of a political genius. And it changed history. From nameless peasants to a 300-year dynasty. 4 popes, 2 queens of France. They funded almost every masterpiece you've ever seen. Michelangelo, he was just a talented stone carver on their payroll. Leonardo da Vinci, an engineer on their books. Even the way you swipe your bank card today, that's a Medici legacy. They didn't conquer with swords. They did it with gold and velvet-wrapped ruthlessness. But this story doesn't start in a palace. It starts in a pandemic and an opportunity only the boldest would dare to grab. 1340. A plague tears through Europe. It kills 1/3 of the continent. They called it the Black Death. But while the crowds prayed and waited to die, a few saw something else: opportunity. And among them was a nameless family from the Tuscany countryside, newly arrived in Florence. They were just cloth merchants, laborers, trying to climb in a society where bloodlines were everything. But they understood one thing: in the world after the plague, the old rules were dead. The financial giants of the time, the Bardi and Peruzzi families, collapsed. Total failure. Why? Because they loaned to kings and never got paid back. They were obsessed with titles. They played by the rules of the aristocracy. The Medici played a different game. Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici wasn't a financial genius. He didn't invent anything new. Double-entry bookkeeping? Bills of exchange? They already existed. But Giovanni understood what the others ignored. Money is just a tool. The real goal is power. In 1397, Giovanni took over the bank. He didn't chase kings. Instead, he targeted one client: the Catholic Church. It was a masterstroke. Not because the church was the richest, but because they had something better than gold: legitimacy. Being the Pope's banker meant you weren't just a moneylender. You were endorsed by God. Giovanni opened a branch right next to the Vatican. He wasn't there to innovate. He was there to build a brand. Medici Bank, trusted by the Pope. It was the ultimate marketing campaign of the 15th century. While other families built palaces to brag, Giovanni built churches for the poor. While others charged sky-high interest, Giovanni offered fair terms. Don't be fooled. He wasn't kind. He was buying loyalty. While the elite wore silk, Giovanni wore simple wool. He ate simply. He invited scholars and artists to talk. The message was loud and clear: I'm one of you. I'm not some arrogant noble. I'm just a Florentine helping my city. This was his real invention: cultural capitalism. He knew that, in a republic, you can't buy power directly. You have to give to receive. You fund art, architecture, and education, not for the love of culture, but because every statue and every church was a massive billboard saying, "The Medici made this possible." By 1429, Giovanni was gone. He left his son, Cosimo, 180,000 florins. But he also left a reputation machine, a system to convert money into influence, a network of artists and scholars ready to move, a formula to control politics from the shadows. But before Cosimo can take it to the next level, he has to survive that cell. because his enemies realized something far too late. You can't defeat a man the city loves just by locking him up. Cosimo de Medici never wanted to be a politician. He wanted to be a scholar. Ancient Greek philosophy, rare manuscripts. But when his father died in 1429, he inherited something heavier than gold: the duty to protect his family in a pit of vipers called Florence. And Florence? It was a political jungle. No kings, no emperors. Just guilds and merchants fighting for a seat in the Signoria, the city council. Everyone wanted power, but everyone was terrified of being called a tyrant. Cosimo played it like a grandmaster. He didn't run for office. He didn't ask for a title. He was just there, in the shadows, lending to the right people, funding the right projects, and always ready to advise. A politician needs campaign cash? Cosimo has it. A public building needs funding? Cosimo pays. A talented artist needs a patron. Cosimo opens the door, and he never asks for anything back. Not immediately. He just makes sure they remember the debt. By the early 1430s, he was the most powerful man in Florence, without a single official paper to prove it. It drove his enemies insane. Rinaldo degli Albizzi saw the writing on the wall. He realized if he didn't act, his own ancient family would fade into nothing. In 1433, Rinaldo struck. He packed the council with his own men and arrested Cosimo for treason. They locked him in a tiny cell at the top of the city hall. Rinaldo wanted him dead, but there was a problem. Cosimo was too popular. Killing him meant a bloodbath in the streets. So they chose exile. 10 years. Rinaldo thought he'd won, but he made a fatal mistake. You can't exile a network. Cosimo went to Venice and was welcomed like a hero. From there, the real game started. He didn't need to be in Florence to control it. The Medici Bank was still open, still lending. His debtors started moving. The artists he funded began planting whispers, making the people miss the Medici Golden Age. Meanwhile, Rinaldo was failing. Without Medici cash, the economy stalled. Public projects stopped. Allies walked away. Just 1 year later, in 1434, a new council was elected. Their first order: bring back Cosimo de Medici. It was a perfect coup. No blood, no riots, just papers, votes, and influence. For the next 30 years, Cosimo ruled from his private study. He wasn't a duke or a prince. He was just a citizen. But when Cosimo spoke, the city went silent. When he suggested, the government acted. He spent over 600,000 florins, about $150 million today, on art and architecture. Don't call it charity. It was an investment. Every church, every statue carried the Medici shield. They were massive billboards, reminding the public who really made Florence great. But his real genius was institutionalizing power. He didn't just buy influence, he built the machines that created it. He founded the Platonic Academy. He built the first public library in Europe. Why? Because a generation of intellectuals trained by the Medici will always be loyal to the Medici. Knowledge is power, and Cosimo controlled the supply. When he died in 1464, Florence gave him a title, Pater Patriae, Father of the Fatherland. His final victory was making patriotism synonymous with the family. To love Florence was to love the Medici, and to hate the Medici, that was treason. He built a machine so perfect it ran itself. It was so strong that his son Piero, crippled by gout and unable to walk, could rule the city from his bed. But that peace was just the fog before the storm. Rival families were sharpening their knives in the dark. They thought the dynasty would die with Piero's legs. They were wrong, because behind Piero was a boy growing up with Cosimo's brain and a much sharper edge. Lorenzo. History calls him the Magnificent. His enemies will call him the Tyrant in the Velvet Mask. A new chapter is starting, and it's going to be bloody. Piero de Medici was a wreck. Gout had turned him into a ghost, carried through Florence on a litter like some dying pharaoh. In 1466, his enemies thought a man who couldn't walk would be easy to kill. They were wrong. Piero had himself carried straight into the heart of the city, right through the line of fire. He didn't use a sword. He used his father's massive spy network to crush the coup before it could even breathe. But Piero knew he was running out of time. He needed a masterpiece to follow him. He had Lorenzo. If Cosimo was an architect of shadows, Lorenzo was the complete package. Poem in the morning, treaty in the afternoon, discussing Plato with scholars 1 hour, jousting with knights the next. It wasn't luck. It was brutal, calculated training, Latin, Greek, finance taught by the best. But the real lesson, the one he heard every day? In Florence, don't ever command, suggest, advise, influence. But never, ever, let them see you rule. In 1469, at just 20 years old, Lorenzo took over. A kid running the world's most powerful bank? It sounded insane. But Lorenzo didn't hide in a palace. He owned the streets. He threw massive festivals and glittering tournaments that set the city on fire. He wrote love songs that echoed through every alleyway. Suddenly, the ruler of Florence wasn't some dry, dusty banker. He was a 15th century rock star. Then came the merger. Lorenzo married Clarice Orsini. It wasn't for love, it was for blood. The Medici were still just new money peasants in the eyes of the elite. They needed blue blood to make their dynasty permanent. It was a long-term investment in their own bloodline. But gold and fame always draw sharks. 1478, the Pazzi Conspiracy. In the middle of High Mass at the Great Cathedral, the knives came out. Lorenzo's brother, Giuliano, died on the marble floor with 19 stab wounds. Lorenzo was hit, but he fought his way out. The plotters thought the people would rise up against the Medici. They were dead wrong. Florence went feral, not against Lorenzo, but for him. They dragged the assassins into the streets and lynched them from the windows of City Hall, bodies swinging in the wind. A brutal, public warning: don't ever touch the Medici. Lorenzo didn't just kill the Pazzi family, he erased them from history. He took their land, he banned their name, but the Pope, who was behind the whole plot, declared war. Florence was facing total annihilation. So Lorenzo went to Naples, alone, no army, no guards, just his tongue and his charm. He walked into the enemy's nest and stayed for 3 months. By the time he left, he had a peace treaty. No blood spilled, just pure, high-stakes diplomacy. From that moment on, Lorenzo turned Florence into the Silicon Valley of the soul. He fed Michelangelo at his own table when the boy was only 13. He bankrolled Da Vinci, Botticelli, the entire Renaissance dream team. But here's the irony. Lorenzo was a genius politician, but a trash banker. He spent so much on art and power that he forgot to check the ledgers. The Medici Bank started to rot from the inside out. In 1492, Lorenzo died at just 43. He left behind a culture that would live forever and a financial empire that was about to scream into the abyss. Piero II, Lorenzo's eldest son, was a total disaster. He lost everything in just 2 years. Florence was furious. The French invaded, and the Medici were kicked out like common criminals. Piero died in exile. Most people thought that was the end. They were wrong. Never underestimate the survival instincts of a financial gang. The Medici didn't die, they just restructured. Giovanni de Medici, Piero's brother, pulled off a historic pivot. He ascended the throne as Pope Leo X, and with the power of the Vatican behind him, he forced the family back into Florence. They didn't just return for business, they returned to carve their name into eternity. Leo X kept Michelangelo on the payroll, starting the Medici Chapel a fortress of art and pure ego. But their power didn't stop at Italy's borders. Catherine de Medici, Lorenzo's granddaughter, climbed the throne as Queen of France. 3 of her sons became kings. The Medici didn't just own bank branches anymore. They owned the bloodlines of European royalty. Then, the mask fell. When Pope Clement VII installed his illegitimate son, Alessandro, as Duke, the Medici started ruling openly with violence. The old constitution, torn up. Guns replaced ledgers. Alessandro was eventually assassinated, but another branch of the family rose even stronger, Cosimo I. In 1569, he became the Grand Duke of Tuscany, an official dynasty that lasted until the last male heir fell in 1737. Biologically, the Medici are extinct, but systemically, they're immortal. Through political marriages, their blood and their mindset dissolved into the royalty of England, France, and the Habsburgs. They taught the world a cold lesson: you don't need land or armies to rule. You just need finance, intellect, and soft power. The Medici laid the foundation for how our world works today. From the way you borrow money to the way central banks manipulate the economy. From billionaires using culture to whitewash their reputations to the hidden hands of global influence. It's all the DNA of Cosimo and Lorenzo. If you've watched this far and feel the chill of real power, leave a comment. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't miss the raw truth about the flow of money and history. See you in the next one.